Hey, I'm Tyler. This is my co-host, Brad. And today, everything's made up and the XP don't matter.
What? Don't tell me XP doesn't matter.
We're talking about improvisation.
I live for XP. I live for experience points. It's like my life, man. Level me up.
Doesn't matter.
Level me up, man.
What is roleplay? Roleplay is one of the three pillars of Dungeons and Dragons. Those three pillars are...
Go figure if you didn't know this already.
Yeah, if you didn't know this already.
Exploration, combat.
Combat.
Usually people's favorite.
Usually the favorite.
And social.
And social. Yep.
So, but we already talked about social.
We talked about social
we need a new video. We can't
do
this today.
That's
what
right.
What are you talking about?
What we're talking about is skills that you could learn at a table, or skills that you could, like mechanisms that you could use at a table, principles that you could practice, put into practice, and invite into your table's culture so that you can have more fun in the role play part.
So they're saying stuff that doesn't require a die roll?
Pretty much.
So why play the game? There's no die roll, Tyler.
Hold on. I'm going to persuade you. Here it goes. That's an 11.
I'm inciting your persuasion check.
It's a 16.
You fool me. You fool me not. You fool me not.
Okay. So I guess this one's done. I tried.
No. Yeah, just turn the camera off. Who cares, right, guys?
Who cares?
Good video. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time. No, actually, I think you're right. There is definitely lots of things that can help up your role-playing game at the table without using the die roll. And it can definitely make the game a lot more fun.
Yeah, and I mean, one of the very first things to kind of establish is when you are role-playing and when you're not.
Yeah, I agree. And this comes down to like table culture, which I think we've talked about a lot, seems like. But yeah, it totally comes down to just how your table wants to work. You know, when I DM, I just kind of always assume that if you're at the table and you say something, it's generally in character.
Right.
You know, and if you don't want to say something in character, you need to let me know this is not in character when you say it. Yeah. But every table may be different. Yep. And if you played with your friends for a long time, you may learn when somebody says something, in character, not in character. But for the most part, it's generally easier if you just if you have a distinction. And I would find out what the proper distinction is at your table.
Totally.
So you don't decide to, say something stupid and have it actually, influence.
Yeah. Well, and a few guys
what the NPC does.
The guys
what do you mean you assaulted my queen? Roll initiative.
What do you mean I
didn't mean that. I didn't mean it. Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
If you didn't mean it, you said it.
You said it. and to certain ways that can add a lot of realism into the game. Now, a lot of people we play with and people we're friends with are big fans of Critical Role, and for them it's easy to know because they use funny voices, and some people want to use a voice.
Some people do, and that makes it easy, but especially me, I don't do voices. I wish I could. I wish I had that cool skill, but I don't.
And I do not have that skill, and yet I try anyways.
But, it's always really fun when you do. I just can't bring myself to do it.
Well, and so this is the thing, is that if you've got a voice or whatever you've got, and in Critical Role, if they're not using their accent that they chose for the character, they're quite obviously not in character anymore. Right. And a lot of times you start a phrase when you don't want to do something in character, you say, DM, this is my question, right? Or you say Brad, or you say what your DM's name. It doesn't matter, but you kind of express that, like you're saying, you express I'm not role playing right now, right? Versus when you have
some cue or some indication that my character's not saying this. Doesn't speak to the invisible ultimate ruler of all things D&D and ask him, hey.
That in and of itself really helps, avoid drama and just have a really smooth session. It's like making that distinction between no, I'm not saying this to that character, I just wanted to ask you this question or something like that. Or
if you're just joking around, which happens a lot of games, right? You come to have fun, right? But sometimes you want to make sure that saying something in jest isn't misconstrued to be something that your character said, right?
Absolutely.
And I would also say, as the time goes on, your campaign goes on, right? People probably kind of learn, it's not something your character would say because we understand who your character is now. But at the beginning, that distinction probably isn't there yet, right? And so it's good to just, again, know, how's your table do it? And if you guys don't know how your table does it, I encourage you to sit down and ask your table, how do we want to handle this so we can have better role play sessions, better instances in the game where we role play and maybe up that in the game, make it better.
Yeah, absolutely. So aside from that cue, and that cue is good. It's good for other people at the table. It's great for your DM to know when you're role playing versus when you're not. But another thing I think that's really great, we call it the Pinocchio principle.
I love the Pinocchio principle.
And as a DM, there's nothing worse than I have this whole sheet that's this character, and you sit down with your PCs and you're excited oh man, they're gonna ask this guy about his childhood, and I've got some. They're gonna
until they don't, and they just decide to stab it.
Well, Maybe
You're
maybe
like, really, guys?
maybe
put all this work into this character, and you decide you just want to stab him with your dagger. I mean, come on.
Now that said, there are
Nothing wrong with that.
Not necessarily wrong
Until
with
he
that
stabs you back.
per se, but I think the principle of the Pinocchio principle is treat the NPCs like they're real, like make them real.
NPCs are people too. NPCs. Repeat that. NPCs are people too.
Well, and you said it really well, I think, earlier today too, where you were saying that how would you interact if this person was a PC? If I had somebody walk in to the room and sit down at the table with us and they were playing that role, how would you treat that person? And, I think it's actually, this carries over from what we were saying with the My See, My Kill group.
Yeah.
They might see somebody come walk in and have a character sheet and be like pumped to play and be like, well, I don't want to kill this guy right away. I want to talk to him. I want to learn their backstory.
He's another character. I want to play with him. I want to interact with him. Right. And I totally agree. Like I think too many times and then it kind of comes just from people playing video games, right? Where, they kind of expect, this NPC, he's got 4 responses, right? And I mean, I don't know how you guys do as a DM, but usually when I DM, I don't write out 4 responses for my NPCs, but I do kind of think about what's their motivations, what's their mentality, what's their goals they're trying to accomplish. And, I don't write out specific responses for that NPC. I have in mind, again, his motivations, his goals, what he's trying to accomplish. And that definitely goes into my role play. And so, kind of like, coming to the Buckingham Palace idea, right? Like, yeah, he's a guard. He's not going to let you in, right?
Right.
And so, you can try to talk to him all you want, but yeah, he might, but maybe this guard's friendly. He might talk back to you. Sure. Right.
Totally.
But again, if it was a player playing that guard, you probably just want, pull out your sword real quick and stab him, right? You probably would try and interact with him.
Yeah.
But but again, it's good to remember that, NPCs are people too.
They're people too. Well, and if you go in with that mentality, I think you avoid a lot of frustrations. Like sometimes if you're just trying to manhandle character NPC XYZ, like you as a player, you can get frustrated and you're like, well, shoot, why aren't they doing what I want them to do? I'm rolling big, or I'm like, I'm a strong person. Strength is not my dump stat. Why aren't they just doing what I want? And it's like,
Tyler, you need magic.
Okay, so spells can get around that's for sure.
Telekinesis. Throw against the wall. Yeah, now I walk into to see the queen.
He really did that. That's not a joke.
Telekinesis. My favorite spell.
High level wizards.
Second favorite spell.
Easy button.
It's like level 5, man.
Yeah.
It's what happens when you get a little gnome who's got and he's really smart. He thinks he can rule the world.
Maybe we still got to do that
or not.
one shot.
You thought he could.
If he does. We got this post level 21 shot lined up.
That's right.
Good night. Let's
see if he can.
We've reached a level beyond. I think you're gonna really love what I have planned for you. Anyways, back to this now. There's some improvisation techniques. Like if you watched Whose Line Is It Anyway, or if you've ever been into or liked the idea of people that were doing improvisation and people who do improvisation really well, it can be a lot of fun. You watch Critical Role; they follow a lot of these principles as well. Right. A bunch of voice actors, nerdy voice actors, if I want to use their cue for it,
right?
And it's fun to watch. Like
it is.
A lot of tables that you might sit down at, people are just waiting to get to combat, maybe.
Right, and I will say too, though, role playing is fun, right? I mean, it's in the name of the type of game it is, right? It's a tabletop role playing game, right? And I think one of the reasons why we're drawn to play a tabletop role playing game is because we are used to those rote responses in a game, right? In a video game, and we want to go beyond that, and D&D is the great way to go beyond it. It's why I actually will love always playing D&D over any other video game, is because of that improvisation and reality that can come to the game that you can't get in a video game, right?
Quick aside on that. That is so true. My very first game of D&D, I followed a guard until he was gonna, relieve himself in a restroom.
Right.
I phased through a wall. I choked the guy out. We made a little bit too much noise. His partner kind of opened up the door and leaned in and went, "Hey, you okay in there?" I took a thing off the guy. It was like his boot or something. I dropped it in the toilet and I made a really low and then dropped it in the toilet and was able to bluff my way out of that. There's no video game that does that.
I can't believe you brought that up.
Well, I gotta say, that's a silly thing that happened, but I was sitting there
now
this
that's
is
what
the
you call
best game ever.
Now that's what you call improv.
That's improvisation. right there. Well, and here you go, because in every improv situation, like you might have the audience that are the people who offer you scenarios. And in the game of D&D, the person that offers the most scenarios by far is obviously the dungeon master.
That's his job. That's one of his job. His main job, right? Is to say, here's the scenario, here's the setting, here's what's going on.
This is what you see, this is what's happening, this is the person, this is their description, all of that stuff. And so in every form of improv that you hear, the first principle is yes and.
Right.
Okay, and so what that means is when somebody offers a scenario, you say yes and you try to like build on top of it. So here's this, let's say here's this farmer and he's really panicked and sweaty and he comes running up to you and he says, "What are you doing here?" And he points a pitchfork at you. And I mean, somebody that's yes and might accept, or following the Pinocchio principle, be like, okay, this is a real person. He's obviously scared. You might say, "Hey, I'm not threatening. Like, hey, come on, let's like talk about this."
You mean I can't just stabby stab him?
Or you might stabby stab him. That's fine. But
stabby means role play is ended.
Well,
and
right.
Combat has begun.
Well, right. And I mean, like The Office makes a really good joke of this because Michael Scott is notoriously bad at improv, and he always goes to improv though, and what he always does is he says, "I've got a gun." And that's kind of the equivalent at the table of just like you jump into somebody else's scenario and you go, "I've got a gun." And now everybody has to do what you say, kind of thing.
Right.
And that works until you go up against somebody that the DM has built that's not intimidated by that, and then you might get frustrated.
Right.
So yes and is a principle of like, and you can even play this game where somebody says, "Wow, this is such a great cake," and you're supposed to say yes and something about the cake, or yes and make the scenario more fun. Right.
And I would say that someone's really cute. The yes and thing too, right? Is it requires you to be listening to what's going on, right? And that seems kind of funny to say that, like, oh, you mean I have to listen to the table, but. I mean, I think we've all probably been at the table, right? Where at some point or another, right, somebody kind of zones out and pulls out their phone, which is bad.
Well,
do not pull out your phone, man. Like, come on. Unless you're using it for your character sheet, but
there can be
still,
excuses, but there's still like, by and large, if you're like disengaging every time it's not your turn to talk, that's probably wrong.
Right. And again, if you're listening to it, then because this doesn't come up with the DM too, it can come up into scenarios where you're interacting with other PCs at the table, right? And if you're not engaging, then the yes and can't happen. It just is like a yes and we're done, and it just stops, right?
Yep.
But in those really cool role playing moments that can happen with PC to PC interactions, right? You can build off of each other and build off of what's going on.
Yep.
If you're listening, then you can employ the yes and principle. For sure.
Absolutely. And listening is really important for improvisation as well. And as you listen and as other members at the table listen, you develop what's called the group mind. Now, what that means is that we're all cognizant of the scenario. So we're all cognizant of the scenario that's been offered, and we're all trying to say yes and. Another way of putting it is you're all trying to make each other look good. Now, sometimes you can get into a scenario where somebody just like jumps in and goes like, "Hey, I'm going to do this now." And it's like, why are you doing that? Like, and it's obvious that person maybe just like wasn't listening, or it's like, "Hey, look, this guy is a dwarf and he's he's persuading with them. He hasn't failed yet. Like, maybe give him his day, that kind of thing."
Right. Well, I would say too, hopefully not doing that just to kind of like, because you're getting bored of the role play, right? Like,
yeah, that's true.
And if you are getting bored of the role play, then I would encourage you to explore why and talk with your party about it. I mean, again, just like any sessions, we've all probably been in a case where we've been into the combat slog, right? And I think you can definitely get into a role play slog. So. But again, that's usually up to the DM to try and help balance that, right?
That's true. Yeah, and if you feel like...
But again, too, don't kill the moment, right?
Yes.
I think a lot of times we can look back at really cool moments in role, in D&D that we've seen, and both ones in combat and on the role playing side of things, it didn't happen because somebody decided to come and kill the moment and just jump in and do something kind of off the wall, right?
Right. Yeah. Let the other players like get their time to shine.
For sure.
And that makes role playing a lot more fun if you kind of go into it with that group mind mentality of like, it's my job to make you look good, it's your job to make me look good, and as long as everybody does that, hey, guess what? Everybody kind of looks good.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's important to remember, right, that like in D&D, it's not the DM story. It's not one PC story. It's the group story that you're all together telling as a group, right?
Yep.
That requires participation of everybody. And so that requires you to engage and help other people. And sometimes they may have their moment, they may shine and stand out more, and that's okay. Yeah. It's fun to go build off of that, and you can help them help their story become better, right?
Yeah.
Just like hopefully they'll reciprocate onto you as a player and help you shine and do better when it's your moment with things.
Yeah.
And that just hopefully brings the party together better and makes you all shine and look really cool as a party. And I think that, again, that's when those cool moments in D&D are made that you'll look back on for years and say, yeah, that was really neat.
Yes. Yes, the moment that the druid tries to talk to the grass, you know,
and the grass responds.
And the grass responds. Millions of little voices. Saying,
what? Wind,
sunlight.
Stop stepping on me.
I never laughed so hard at a table is when the druid was trying to talk about where did the bad guys go, and we tell him to talk to the grass, and he goes, without any like prompting from us or anything, he's just played D&D for a long time. He goes, oh, grass is so dumb. I hate talking to grass. And like you guys improv this like scenario that was so good. It was so funny. Yeah, but the moments like that are just like lacking if you're not like paying attention, you're not listening. And you know what? If you haven't listened,
that's a fun way to use a spell to bring out an improv and social scenario.
That's true.
It's just total off the wall.
That's true.
Which is fun.
Yeah, and I mean, okay, so if you haven't been listening, or if you feel like group mind is slipping, as a PC, you should ask. You should say, okay, you know what, guys, I'm sorry, I'm a little lost. What is this guy saying? What is this guy about? Or something. Like, get back on board. Right. If you feel like you're kind of like wanting to pull up social media or something and just like disengage, don't. Like, get back engaged.
For sure.
And then
because they say if you don't, you're just kind of blocking things from moving forward. You're now being a hindrance to it. And again, like you're sitting there around the table playing together as friends. And I mean, come on, you don't want to block it, right?
Exactly. Well, and it's more fun for you if you engage.
For sure.
And then as a DM, I think the inverse is true too. If you see people are disengaging, it's good to kind of just like shut things down and go, hey, listen, I want to get everybody back on board. Put your phone away. Let's get back on board real quick. And like, just get people back up to speed. But, if you have a good group, you shouldn't have to do that a lot.
Right. But I agree with you. As a DM, that is that is part of your role, right? And is to bring that back and get it going again. And it's important. It can be a hard skill sometimes as a DM. I mean, you have lots of things you're paying attention to. You're paying attention to NPCs, and you've got your notes written down. You're trying to pay attention to die rolls and when you may roll and what you just rolled or what needs to go on. And there's a lot going on. You can kind of sometimes lose track, but it's important to pay attention to what's going on the table and kind of help bring things back in. If somebody is not participating, take that as a cue as a DM and try and get them to participate. Sometimes people may be timid about it, and maybe they're thinking about something they want to do, or maybe other PCs are pressuring them to do something or to say something. And, I think a really good principle and technique to do is just like, say that PC like, hey, Tyler, it's your turn. What do you want to do? Hey, Tyler, the guard's asking you, what's your response? And that can sometimes help signal to other PCs that may be pressuring that PC, like, no, it's not their decision. It's that PC's decision. And that can help bring them back into those moments, those role play moments of what's going on, and help them to get them to engage.
Yep. And if you've got a successful group mind going on, it's really easy to do yes and. Like, okay, so this guy, he's not the bard, he's not the warlock, he's not even the paladin, he's the fighter. And he's like, I've got an idea. And he walks up and he wants to persuade the person. Or he's trying to role play with the person to do the thing. Like, bad etiquette or bad table culture would be, hey, stop it, your charisma is low. Right. We all know charisma is your dumb stat. Stop it, or something. Right. Like, yes, and is like, I'm going to assist you, or a good group, group mind is getting on board with that and kind of rolling with it, because again, like, you create those moments to shine.
Roll with it, guys.
An 8, I can beat an 8. What?
No, you can't. No, you can't.
That's a 1 again. Okay.
Dice doesn't like you. I got the hot hands. I got hot hands.
Despicable.
At you, Tyler. It's magic.
So I mean, what we've talked about, like, it's avoid blocking. Blocking is in improv. That's a term that means like it kills the scenario, kills the momentum. Sometimes you're just deciding I'm gonna like make a joke or something, and in some cases that means like you're not following the Pinocchio principle. You're saying to the farmer, "Hey, your pants are down," and it's like, well, he doesn't believe that. He doesn't think that.
Or being the wrong design. Well, I don't want to participate in the conversation, so therefore I am going to stab the guy in the back.
Right. Which
sometimes
I guess calls for it, but maybe a lot of times it doesn't.
Well, I would just say be cognizant, right? I mean, people will often throw the excuse, well, that's just my character. It's but it's the game is not about your character. The game is about everybody's character, right?
Yeah. Or, okay, and so we're role playing with a blue dragon. Maybe it was an adult dragon, maybe it was ancient, I can't remember. And yeah, the rogue decides I'm going to look around the treasure trove and try to steal something.
Right.
And it's like, in that case, I think that's maybe a situation where group mind is not there, because we're getting a lot of really useful information out of this blue dragon. And also, he didn't kill us right away. So this is like unique. This is interesting. And we're kind of jiving with him. And then, you kind of let your character's mechanics kind of get in the way sometimes. Like, you feel eager, you want to participate, and wanting to participate is good, but I think listening, create that group mind, and then use yes and to allow those scenarios to build their way out, I think is a much favorable experience than just like, I'll steal something every time, I'll stab something every time, I ignore people every time, I always let the wisdom guy or the charisma guy talk. All those are probably inferior experiences.
Yeah. Well, and again too, we've talked about this before, but look for other ways you can participate, not just only through a skill roll sometimes.
Yep.
And to think too that just because your character may not necessarily be good at a charisma check doesn't mean he can't participate in the social scenario, right?
Yeah.
There's definitely aspects that maybe other characters will shine better, but it doesn't mean you just sit back and don't do anything, right?
Yeah.
I mean, just like you don't want to sit back in combat and say, well, I don't have a sword, so I'm going to just sit in the corner, fold my arms, and watch everybody do all the work, right?
Yeah.
Unless you're the cool wizard who doesn't do anything because he doesn't need to. He's got his arm of animated weapons.
Magic.
Anyways, this has been great, guys. Thank you.
Yeah.
We're Motley Mimic. Thanks for hanging out. We'll catch you next time.
Yeah, the shopkeeper says that's 10 gold. So. Oh yeah, they're very interested in. Holy crap, a Pikachu! Okay. Just a second. God damn! Come on. Yes. What was the question?